So, misdirection, one of the big terms in magic. I remember when I first started out and I kept hearing about misdirection, and it was always this big pivotal thing. And even nowadays, I still think that it is an extremely important thing. But back then it was vastly, very, very different, right? And honestly, people aren't wrong. Misdirection is just like any other sleight, any other technique in magic. It's just a tool for you to accomplish certain effects in magic, except that it's not only limited to cards, it's not only limited to coins or rings or whatever, right? It's this universal thing, it's this universal concept and principle that applies to everything in magic. And I remember when I first started out in magic and I was terrified of it. It's not anything that's mechanical, it's not tangible, it's psychological, which means that it's also a very difficult thing to sort of practice because you basically have to perform to practice it. And even then, even when you're performing and even when you're used to misdirection, it's not necessarily something that is 100% surefire, right? Quote unquote, depending on the type of technique of misdirection they're using, because depending on the person or the group, it's as in misdirection, it may or may not work as intended. So I understand why it's terrifying, and it doesn't help that in YouTube there's such a huge focus on mechanics, on techniques and methods in general, that basically just causes misdirection in general to gain this sort of mystique, and it's also been sidelined, causing misdirection to be basically sort of this terrifying thing for a lot of beginner magicians who go through YouTube to basically learn magic. But of course there's also this question of making misdirection a bit more complicated than it needs to be, especially when it's presented on YouTube, because people on YouTube do say this quote a lot, and I think everyone at this point does know this quote, and it is, "The larger action covers the smaller action." And beginners actually have a tendency to actually take that quote quite literally, because no one really bothers explaining what that actually means. They just basically think that, oh, I need a larger action to cover like something more secretive, something smaller, when in reality, it's something that's not quite like that, right? It's a lot more simple. And so this is just a smaller video to sort of demystify what in reality misdirection is and what it can be at a basically smaller level, because it's actually not that complicated. So what is misdirection? At its core, misdirection is basically having something to distract the audience's attention while you're sort of using that distraction to accomplish a certain secretive action, let's just say. I think Our Magic back in 1911 by David Devant, I think that's how you pronounce it, and John Neville Maskelyne put it best. Quote, "The misdirection which forms the groundwork of magic does not consist in telling lies, with the object of deceiving the spectator's intelligence. It consists, admittedly, in misleading the spectator's senses, in order to screen from detection certain details for which secrecy is required." So, not lies, just sort of misleading things that allow you to hide certain things from detection. And those two are indeed right, because it does form the groundwork of magic, because it's a universal concept. It's not a technique limited to cards, it's not a technique limited to coins, it's a universal principle, and it's not restricted by item types, right? It's just overall an easy way to make sure that things aren't spotted because certain moves have flaws, right? At its core, magic is not perfect, right? Every single move has its inherent flaw. For example, even something as seemingly flawless as a flap card, for example. If you do a flap card on stage, which is the most optimal point where you actually use a flap card, because people can't really see the seam of a flap card, right? If you have a mic attached to it, there could be a chance that the flap of the flap card could be heard. So everything, no matter how perfect, may have its flaws, right? Whether that be sound, angle issues, because some people aren't like see it at the right position, or you can't control everything, or timing, and many other things, right? every single move, every single technique, every single effect has flaws because we're trying to construct a perfect illusion with imperfect tools. And so let's just take, for example, sort of how misdirection can be used to act as a buffer for even the simplest of techniques. So let's take, for example, the 5 Points in Magic back in 1988 by Juan Tamariz. And so he does a very, very simple misdirection tactic when he does something as simple as an Elmsley count. Now, obviously for an Elmsley count, we've all learned the Elmsley count. It's very, very simple and very, it's hard to screw up an Elmsley count, but on the off chance that some people do spot something, Juan Tamariz actually does something very, very interesting. So he actually does the first count, right? So he counts out 1. And then when he actually goes to count off the second card and to do the replacement, what he actually does is he looks up. He looks up, and people, because people have a tendency to sort of mimic other people and, they see from the periphery just you looking up. And just from that, they also look up. And when the audience members actually look up, that's when he actually does the replacement and then the 2-card count over here, right? And then he looks back down, and then you can then proceed with the rest of the Elmsley count as per usual. So it's not this huge thing, and again, it's not guaranteed to work because not everyone will inherently look up when you look up, but on the off chance that someone does look up, great. That's great, because now, in case that they do spot the replacement and then the count of the hidden card, you have cover. You have that misdirection that hides that maybe a flaw or something like that, right? So that's just something very, very simple that Juan Tamariz just uses misdirection for because he can. Because why not use all the tools in your arsenal when you can, right? You're just like, you're handicapping yourself if you're not using everything when in fact you could. And it's just something as simple as looking up, right? So that's just for an Elmsley count. Imagine how many more things that you could sort of apply this to, even though it's not like a difficult thing, right? So you don't have to only limit yourself to just like complicate techniques and all that stuff, right? Just something as simple as an Elmsley count can benefit immensely from something as simple as just looking up, and that counts as misdirection. So that's misdirection, and again, it's not a technical move, but a technique and principle that sort of encompasses magic, and it just encompasses every tactic used to get your spectator to just look away from something that you want to hide, even though you perform a move, I don't know why I said that, even though you perform a move perfectly. There we go, that works a lot better. So yeah, that is just misdirection as a definition and as an example for an easier technique that even masters do, even when, it's not necessary, let's just say. So, to demystify misdirection, here is just another misdirection technique that you can actually use. Now, I did, of course, present the Elmsley count and then just looking up by Juan Tamariz, but again, if you're too scared that it might not work for just looking up or doing whatever, right, there's another technique that can sort of help you up, and again, it's very simple, it's a very small thing. Again, most misdirection techniques aren't going to be very overt, they aren't going to be very big, because the more obvious it is, like, oh, look over there, right? That's even worse. So here is just another very, very simple, very small technique for misdirection. So the easiest form of misdirection, and one that I still actually use, is just call out someone's name and then talk, right? It's so silly, but this actually automatically causes someone to just look up. Why? Because, well, what kind of person doesn't react to someone's name, like their own name being called out, right? Because now it's like, you can say like whatever word, and it could be like, if you're performing for a group, it could be like a word for everyone else. But the moment that you say someone's name, now it's personal. Now they're being summoned to basically talk, right? So if you say someone's name, like Curtis or whatever, my own name, right? Then I have to look up because that's rude, and also like you're addressing me directly. So now I have to look up to be like, yeah, what's up? Why'd you call my name, right? So just saying someone's name is enough to get them to look up if they're like set on burning your hands, right? Now, obviously, you have to have a reason as to why you're calling out their name. So after you call their name, you can say something as simple as a confirmation, a clarification, or just like something as simple as you remember your card, right? Like just something as simple as that, to sort of follow up why you actually called out their name. And just that is enough to get them to look up. And then that's all the misdirection that you need to basically just do whatever technique that you want, right? And that's the easiest way to get misdirection. Essentially, it's a very, very simple thing. And again, much like every other misdirection technique, it's a small thing. It's a small thing. It's not a big like overt thing, because big overt things never really work in your favor, especially if you're performing in a more intimate setting, because most of the time it's quite difficult to have big things to misdirect people, unless like, I don't know, like you're performing on the street and like a truck passes by and you're like, oh, that's loud, and then people have to look at it. But that's whatever, right? So it's such a small thing is all you need for misdirection, because as long as you keep talking to them, that's how long they'll actually keep staring up at you, because it's going to be weird if you're just looking at the deck while you're talking to someone, and that's very, very awkward. So of course, as I'm talking, they have to continue to look up, or occasionally glance down, but that's fine, right? Or else it's going to be really awkward and really weird. So essentially, just calling out someone's name, just talking to them, that's going to be enough to have any sort of misdirection. So next time that you need a small window of opportunity and you just need a very basic point of entry into the world of misdirection, this is just something extremely simple that you can do. And that's just a very simple overview on misdirection. It's definitely easy to see why misdirection has become such a puzzle, especially for beginners, since it's very circumstantial and it won't always work. And there's not really like a set technique for it, because people react to different things, and what might work for one group might not work for another group, because human psychology, right? But that also doesn't mean that's this big, scary thing. Again, misdirection is so small, so simple, but it's just very, very useful. Now, if you do want to read up on misdirection, I highly recommend you to look up the works of Slidini and Juan Tamariz. And honestly, just practice more, just perform more. That's pretty much the only way for you to sort of really get better at misdirection, because if I'm just talking to a camera, if I'm just performing for a camera, it's very difficult for me to sort of misdirect people's attentions unless I'm doing something like an in-transit action, which is a completely different thing. But yeah, basically just perform more, just test out things more, and just talk more. That's pretty much it. And so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little crash course in misdirection, and stay safe, stay healthy, perform more, and yeah, have fun, and take care, and see you guys next time.